podemos volver a tomar nuestros lugares para comenzar, de favor. Muy bien, a continuación vamos a presentar el estudio sectorial sobre competencia en telecomunicaciones que hizo el doctor Martin Cave. El doctor Martin Cave fue VP Centennial Professor en la London School of Economics por el periodo 2010-2011 y es profesor invitado en el Imperial College Business School de Londres. Desde 2001 hasta 2010 fue profesor y director del Centro de Administración y de Regulación en la Escuela de Negocios de Warwick y antes fue profesor de Economía en Brunel University. Es autor, coautor y editor de diversos libros sobre regulación, entre los cuales destacan el Manual de Economía de las Telecomunicaciones, volúmenes 1 y 2, el Manual de Oxford sobre Regulación, Competencia y Política de Competencia, un análisis comparativo de Europa del Este y Europa Central. Sus trabajos académicos también incluyen numerosos estudios de competencia, política de competencia y regulación en el sector de telecomunicaciones. El doctor Cave ha trabajado ampliamente con gobiernos, autoridades de competencia y de telecomunicaciones y reguladores en el sector de telecomunicaciones, en los países de Asia, Australia, el Caribe, Europa, América Latina, América del Norte y Nueva Zelanda. También ha realizado trabajos para la Comisión Europea, el International Communication Union y la OCDE. Ha sido nombrado testigo experto en la Comisión Europea en el caso relacionado con Roaming International y también fue nombrado testigo experto para la Autoridad de Competencia de Suecia en el caso Margin Squeeze ante la Corte de Distrito de Estocolmo. En América Latina ha asesorado al regulador de telecomunicaciones en Colombia y en mayo de 2011 fue uno de los miembros de la OCDE que hizo recomendaciones a México sobre la necesidad de reformar su sector de telecomunicaciones. Muchas gracias, doctor Cave, por estar aquí.
Okay, thank you for that rather lengthy discourse on my rather shady past. First of all, I'd like to say I'm delighted to be here and to give this presentation. As I am now associated with the competition authority myself, I have to say that everything I'm going to say represents my own view and not that of the UK Competition Commission. You'll also see from looking at this slide that in undertaking this work, I was smart enough to enlist 2 colleagues. So it is in fact joint work by myself, Andreas Avgusti, and Adrian Foster. And that probably explains why it's so very long. Not the only reason, but one of the reasons. Let me just tell you a bit about the report. It basically tries to present a kind of guide as to how competition law can be and has been applied to the telecommunications sector. It has basic introductory chapters, which I'll talk a little bit about because I think these institutional issues and issues of the division of labor between the regulator and the competition authority are of truly fundamental importance for the telecommunications sector. There's a brief discussion of the definition of markets and the assessment of market power, which of course we all do in one form or another. We then go on to analyze 7 competition issues. I chose those issues because they seem to me to be the ones which are most salient and controversial and widely examined in competition law as applied to the telecommunications sector. And as you see, there are no surprises in them, except possibly one which is, I think, acquiring increasing importance and is to do with the increasing tendency for telecommunications firms to try and share their networks in order to reduce costs or alternative for other, perhaps slightly less reputable motives. We also, in the report, discuss mergers, which are very important in telecommunications world, particularly in mobile, where there is an observable tendency globally towards consolidation. Not all of those attempted consolidations are successful, of course. See, for example, the unsuccessful attempt of AT&T to merge with T-Mobile in the United States, but it's obviously a very important issue. In relation to each of the 7 competition issues and mergers and acquisitions, we try to outline the types of conduct which might be investigated and describe what might be abusive conduct. We show what kind of evidence may be required. We show how the evidence can be deployed in order to form the key judgments about the extent of market power and whether an abuse is present. We discuss possible remedies, and we also contain summaries of 25 competition law telecommunications cases, of which half come from Latin America. I've just, in fact, been rereading the summaries of those cases this morning, and I'm rather ashamed to say that even though it's quite clear that the summaries are not in Spanish, I'm not completely confident they're entirely in English either, so I think I'll have to revise them to introduce slightly greater clarity into some of them. And I'd also like to say about the cases that many of the actions taken by competition authorities, including those in Latin America, are really fairly frontal assaults upon what the firm has done. They identify a number of possible abusive forms of conduct, and so they're very broad cases. And in the summaries, we've just tried to focus upon one single aspect of those, which may in fact not be the most important one, but as an illustration of the particular abuse that we're talking about. And as I say, all this adds up to quite a lengthy document, but let me make it plain that it's only a kind of introductory guidebook into how one might address these issues. I hope it's helpful and will be helpful for some of those people listening in competition authorities throughout Latin America, but it obviously isn't exhaustive in any way. I guess it's probably true that none of the contributors to this very interesting series of papers are attempting to be exhaustive. Otherwise, our works would run into hundreds or possibly even thousands of pages. Now, there's a problem here because there are important differences in the competition laws in different countries. And that's as true of the 40 or so countries in the Latin American region as in the rest of the world. I mean, clear examples, famous examples, comparisons of US and European competition law exhibit really quite major differences, some of which I'll refer to in the course of these brief remarks, just to illustrate some of the key issues which may arise. However, it's also true, looking at it in the other way, there's a huge amount of common ground in contemporary competition law and its application. And so what we've attempted to do in the report is to focus upon the common ground and try and find the issues and the approaches which are likely to be widely used among a very large, the largest possible set of competition authorities, and really focus upon those. But it does mean, of course, that lots of things that we say, or arguably everything that we say, is unlikely to apply with perfect accuracy to any one country. And so there's a very important health warning in this. Don't assume that what's described in our report is actually going to correspond to the detail of the legislation and the precedents and the other aspects of procedure and so on, which will apply in any particular country. I mean, that's probably a blindingly obvious thing to say, but I think it's a kind of important health warning. But what we're talking about here, of course, is a kind of boundary issue. We have the telecommunications sector in the middle. We have specific legislation introducing regulation on one side, and on the other side we have the generic competition law in any particular country. And so there's obviously an important issue that has to be resolved as to how these two different forms of intervention sit with one another. And I just want to say a few words about that to begin with. I mean, obviously, these are decisions which are made, so to speak, at a higher level than the level of the agency. They're made by legislatures rather than by implementing agencies. but nonetheless the decisions that are made there are of vital importance. And another key point which emerges from this slide is that it is a very clear and traditional distinction between fixed networks and mobile networks. I mean, it's staggering to think that until about 20 years ago, there were no mobile networks of any significance. Yet now, of the world's population, 6 billion are connected to mobile networks and 1 billion are connected to fixed networks. So mobile networks have really outstripped and overtaken fixed networks in a very fundamental way. And that has key implications for the division of labor between regulation and competition law, arising from the fact that mobile networks are quite clearly and obviously much more replicable than